All right, hello, wine drinking people. We are back. And man, yesterday it was just a parade of suppliers in the store. All right, next up, we had Anthony in from Florida Wine Company, and Anthony had a producer in from Tuscany, from Montalcino, and they make Chianti Colli Sinisi. I didn't realize this, that if you have vineyards and you plant them in Montalcino, you have to buy the rights to call it Brunello di Montalcino, and yeah, or you can buy the rights to call it Chianti Colli Sinisi, which I'm guessing is going to be much cheaper. And well, these guys, you know, this is a lighter style wine, so it's not something that would be mistaken for Brunello di Montalcino. They're young vines, and you get some lovely Ragnaie is the name of the property, and Ragnaie. I hate people that bring me wines I can't pronounce, damn it. And you know, I know that this is the name of the birds that nest in this area, the bird nets that they use in this area, but you know, what a dumb name for a wine. Jeez. I mean, maybe they can pronounce this in Italy, but you bring something like this, you want to sell it in the United States. Can we just change the name slightly? Like, let's call it bird nets, or something that we can say. But a really nice little wine, light and fruity, strawberry, cherry fruit, some fresh plowed earth nuance and herbs, and you know, really light and savory style of Sangiovese. But still pretty nice at $22.50. And then we had the Rosso di Montalcino, which a bit more terroir here, a bit more nuanced on the nose. That dry porcini, a hint of black tar, that minerality that you get out of Montalcino, and some tart red cherry fruit. But bright and fresh on the tongue with a nice amount of that fruit showing, and some silky tannins, and nice and fresh on the finish. The Brunello di Montalcino, 2005. Hey, this is you know, this is a good vintage for Brunello, but a very forward and drinkable vintage. This wine's got nice complexity on the nose, a bit more of that terroir showing, some dried leather saddle, porcini, and lovely red plum and red cherry fruit to that. Nice and elegant on the tongue, has a really nice texture. But the tannins kind of round and very drinkable, typical of this 2005 vintage, but a nice little Brunello, whatever the heck you want to call it. All right, and then a wine from Australia called Alpha Box and Dice Tarot wine. Had a tarot card on it. And, you know, another one of these attractively packaged wine. Ronnie Sanders is behind this. It's a Grenache. You know, Grenache I love, but for some reason, wines with that are varietally labeled Grenache can be a very tough sell, especially at around $10. Hey, unless it says bitch on it or something like that, which I hear, hey, Dan Phillips is going back in business, and you're going to have bitch from Spain, because you're allowed to go out of business in Australia, fall into receivership, and then start up a company in another country, apparently. So they won't let Dan back into Australia, but apparently the Spanish people, who are in deep financial trouble at this time, are thinking about letting Dan in. And the word on the street is, the bitch is coming back. All right, well, this wine was, I would say, equally as good as the bitch, which was a nice little wine, and, you know, fresh and fruity, kind of that berry pie kind of fruit you get from the Southern Rhone, dark spices and fresh floral notes. Big on the tongue, but smooth tannins, and a real crowd pleaser style wine. I think when people actually try Grenache, it's an easy wine to like, but man, it can be a hard wine to get people to try. Doesn't just fly off the shelf by itself, I mean. All right, next up, the folks from Domaine Serene were in. This is one of the top Pinot producers in the world. Not just Oregon, folks. These guys will put their wine blind up against the best wines from anywhere. Where's the Domaine Serene table? Oh, we don't have a bottle in the store. I'm embarrassed. One of my favorite producers, the Yamhill Cuvée, the Evenstadt Reserve, are wines that we almost always have in the store. My favorite wine in this tasting was the Winery Hill, and this is a wine that will be coming in next week. But let's start out with the Dijon Clone Chardonnay, the Etoile. This wine, I don't know why they can't make great Chardonnay in Oregon, but for some reason, most of them are underwhelming. This is one of the best that I've had. It's got lovely green apple, lemon, custard kind of fruit on the nose with some hints of nutmeg. Very distinct minerality. Very little oak in this wine. It's old oak, so you don't really get a lot of that new oak spice, but lovely freshness and crisp green apple-like fruit again, lemon zest on the tongue, and a nice chalky kind of minerally note on the finish. But similar to a white Burgundy, that's what I would have probably guessed this was in a blind tasting. All right, next up we had the Côte Sud, another Dijon Clone Chardonnay, this one from the Dundee Hills. This is the largest production of all the Chardonnays. The vineyard planted in 1992. It sees about half of the production sees new oak, and you say, how do you give it half new oak? Well, you blend the barrels together. Half of them are new that you blend together, so it's really easy. And then you've got some lovely smoky nuance to this. Very different than the first Chardonnay. Kind of a hazelnut character also. Flinty kind of minerality. And some delicious, ripe kind of red apple fruit here. Nice texture on the tongue of whole milk. And some nice minerality showing. Really that flinty and smoky note coming through on the finish a little bit. You know, a little bit off-putting for me. I don't like wines that are really oaky and smoky. I'd rather see the terroir and see the vineyard site expressed more than the oak barrel that the wine was put in. All right, next up we have the Yamhill Cuvée, and this is kind of their bread and butter Pinot Noir from Oregon. It's got that lovely allspice and dried rose petal kind of fruit nuance on the nose. The candied strawberry. This is the baby brother to the Evenstadt. And it's two properties, one in Dundee and one in Eola, that is blended together to make this wine. A little bit of an understated wine. 07 was kind of like that as a vintage, but a nice savory finish. 2006, on the other hand, which is what the Evenstadt still is, this is a big style vintage, a warm year, a lot of fruit in these wines, as this one was displaying on the nose some lovely smoky bacon fat character, a little brown sugar, and some big dark cherry fruit, black raspberry, black cherry, and nice floral aromas, big and juicy, with a nice hint of zesty acidity still in the finish, but these 2006s are marked by the big seductive fruit in the wine. The Winery Hill, as I mentioned before, was my favorite wine. This is the highest elevation of all the vineyard sites in the Dundees. Very concentrated, very rich bouquet of aromas coming out, exotic spices, and a lovely fresh floral bouquet coming out in this one. The most nuanced in the nose in terms of the floral component. But it's 100% Dijon clones, and really big and juicy wine. A lot of perfume showing also through the finish. But this wine could use a little time. I'd like to see what this wine's like in a couple of years. Most excellent Pinot Noir from Domaine Serene. All right, and then the Bradford, which this wine's like 100% new oak. And man, you really notice the oak in this wine. Pinot Noir, to me, doesn't need that oak. And, you know, nice amount of brown, dark spices, blueberry, black cherry fruit, new leather, pretty complex bouquet, big Pinot Noir on the palate, like I mentioned before, a lot of oak and that tannin showing, and packing a bit of heat on the finish. It's the most alcoholic of these wines also, but still a really nice little wine and still fairly balanced for how big it is. Next up, we had the Rock Block Syrah, and this is from the Walla Walla area of Oregon. This is a valley that stretches into Washington State, so you know, you see Walla Walla, could be Oregon, it could be Washington. This is from the Oregon side. Sweet tobacco, spice, dark cocoa, hints of bittersweet chocolate, a lot of nuance to the nose here. Toasty oak, dark plum, blackberry fruit, blackberry liqueur-like fruit. Big and juicy on the tongue with a lot of that sweet fruit showing up, but still lovely freshness on the finish. Great Syrahs. You know, tend to be, a lot of people like these overly fruity Syrahs. To me, great Syrahs have got that freshness on the finish, and they need to finish dry, not sweet. All right, well, a couple of local guys stopped in next, the Ellman brothers, not the Allman brothers, the Ellman brothers, and these guys are making their own wine. They've invested in a facility in Napa called Crush Pad, and there's several other people that make their wine there, and they've gotten some great fruit sources. The Gap's Crown Vineyard for the Pinot Noir. They've entered a new Russian River Pinot Noir into the lineup. This Gemma wine, which is a Bordeaux-style blend, and then they've got a wine called BB, which is a Cabernet and Merlot blend, but all of the wines really nice. You know, my favorite, the Alexis Sky, the Pinot Noir from the Gap's Crown Vineyard. This wine's got some lovely exotic spices, black cherry liqueur-like fruit, lovely fresh flowers, sweet herbs, and it's got a lot of complexity on the finish as well, and a lot of freshness. A really nice bottle of wine. The Gemma was my favorite of the two Cabernets, and you know, they're both about the same price. You know, well, actually the B&B, yeah, about the same price, $72 and $77, but just a bit more complexity showing on the nose here. These guys are getting some Beckstoffer fruit, and like I said, pretty smart about how they went about going and doing this. They actually invested in the crush facility, and they leased that facility out to several other people to help pay for it, and then they just started out with a couple hundred cases of each of these wines, and they're in some of the top restaurants in South Florida. Hey man, you go out to eat and you schmooze with some of these restaurateurs, that's the best way to get your wine in there and make good wine, which these guys have done.